joining us from. Thank you so much, Aditi. Well, just by way of introduction, my name is Arpit Chaturvedi. I'm the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Global Policy Insights, which is a think tank based out of New Delhi, London, and New York City. We are headquartered in India with small teams in the UK and the US and consultants all over the world. I am one of the instructors in the Recycle business responsibility and sustainability reporting workshop. And today, the agenda for the day is that we will talk a little bit about what this workshop series is all about. We will take you through the whole of the structure and the format of the workshop series and answer your questions around that. And after that, it will be followed by a fireside chat with Mr. Curtis Raynold, who's really somebody who I look up to, and somebody who's a UN veteran, having spent about 3 decades in the United Nations. He's worked very closely with Kofi Annan, and he has served in various departments in the leadership positions at the United Nations. And when I was speaking to Curtis about this particular event, he was very excited because of the fact that this is an event which really gets businesses to partner with the larger civil society, and which really gets businesses on the path of sustainable development. And that was the reason why we are having this whole of the workshop series, because ESG reporting is getting more and more important as we go. And ESG reporting is something that a lot of people look at as compliance, but more and more companies are finding it to be the truth that the more you live some of those values and incorporate some of the ESG logics in how you develop your internal processes, how you in fact structure the whole of your business model, the more it is beneficial for your company to survive in the longer run. So our understanding of ESG is that you look at it both from a compliance perspective and a risk perspective, but also a growth perspective over here. So without further ado, we will jump into explaining or talking about what this workshop series is all about. And I can see Martin over there. Thank you so much for having your video on. Usually it's very helpful for me when I'm talking if the video on the other side is on. And I really want to keep today's session very open and engaging. Thank you so much, Ishwarya. I'm going to take you through the workshop structure. And hey, John, so good to see you over here. Hey. So Curtis will join us in a bit, John. So I will, it would be nice for you both to meet again over here. But thank you so much for joining. And thanks, Kunal. Now, what I'm going to do is, I don't know, Aditi, do you think we have a chance to very quickly go through the table and, just introduce ourselves in 10 seconds, if you think that's possible? All right. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. Very quickly, we're going to go around the table and introduce ourselves so that we can just remain interactive throughout the day. So I see Martin. Martin, over to you if you can unmute yourself and very quickly introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Founder of Snowcap. Founder of My Sustain Online. Previously working for the Natural Step, 27 years experience in sustainability, mainly on the global arena.
Awesome. And lots to learn from you, I'm sure. Thanks, Martin. And Ishwarya, over to you.
Good day, everyone. I'm Aishwarya Kandasamy, based in Chennai, India. And I'm a lawyer, and I have great inclination towards climate laws and policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishwarya. And John.
Yeah, good morning, John Dixon here. I'm kind of a consultant with a couple main organizations. One is Global Peace Foundation. The other is World Trade Centers Association. And I work with several NGOs also, and I'm chairman of the Arpa Chaturvedi fan club, and appreciate all the good work. Thank you.
Well, that's a mutual one for both of us. I'm the secretary of John Dixon's fan club as well. No, thank you, John. And Kunal, over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Kunal Raman. I am heading the business for this firm called UpDap. We are basically a digital ESG tech company, and I'm based around New Delhi.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us, Kunal. Aditi, I'm thinking maybe you might want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. Really happy to have you all here and learn more about the workshop, just like me. So I'm working as a senior program coordinator at Global Policy Insights, and I overlook all the programs and all the events that we conduct online and offline, and the whole back end of how to go about it. So hope you guys take away something good and new from us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Aditi. And let's see. I'm going to go Vandit, Priyank, Vijay Sharan. Over to you.
Hello.
Priyank, go ahead.
Hi, Arpit. My name is Priyank. I'm part of Recykal. I work in the sustainability team.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Priyank. And Vijay Sharan, over to you.
Hi, good evening all. My name is Vijay Sharan. I'm from Tamil Nadu South. So I deal with plastic scraps for recycling and all the stuffs.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Vijay Sharan. And we're going to go. All right. I see Mr. Avast Yak. Is that a username, or I don't know how to pronounce your name?
Sorry to good afternoon. Good evening to all of you. My name is Anand Avasthi. Actually, this mail ID is from yes, that's why the Avasthi is my the surname and AK is my first name. So
Anand.
Yes, sir. So with me, Mr. Rajiv Fork is also there in this company. So hi, sir. So basically, we are from the KEC International. We are the leading EPC company, and KEC basically governed with the RPG Group company, and we are dealing with the manufacturing and the high tension towers only.
Awesome. Awesome.
So we are working in the pan India and the overseas.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you both, for joining. We'll probably do a few more introductions, then we jump in, then we can do a few more so that we can also cover some of the content. So how about we have Mr. Jagari Mani, Chandan, and Seher. Either of you, whoever can go first. Seher.
Good evening, everyone. I am Sarasana Kapoor. I'm a student from Jindal, OP Jindal Global University, and I've got a vast interest in UN as well as international laws.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Seher. Awesome. And Jagari.
Hi, this is Jagori Mani. I'm from the eWest Assistant Manager Operations, and I'm from Recykal. I take care of the US operations.
You're from the US. All right. Okay, great.
Yes.
Thanks.
US.
Thanks, Jagari.
Oh, thanks.
Okay.
Hi, this is Chandan.
Hi, Chandan.
Program Officer under Recykal Foundation for ITC CSR project in Mysore.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, welcome. All right. So I'll come every now and then. We are going to keep at least the first hour very informal, and I'll keep coming for more introductions. I'm going to share my screen over here quickly, and we'll go through a bit of the program. Please do feel free to stop me wherever you want to, and you can use the raise hand feature. If you're not able to find the raise your hand feature, then it's also just fine to unmute yourself and stop me. I'm usually not great at reading chat messages, but I can definitely take them towards the end altogether. But I would really encourage that you unmute yourself if you want. You can, open your video, and then we can discuss a little bit about what you are looking for from this particular workshop series, etc. All right. So in many ways, today is the day, which is the open session with Curtis, is also part of what we want to do with the whole of the workshop. So in many senses, you're at least going to be attending a part of it. And today it's going to be more general and around the overview of why ESG and sustainability reporting, etc., is important. So today is more going to be around the why and getting a sense of the landscape. And when the formal workshop starts, it's going to be really around the technical stuff on how do you measure materiality, how do you report these things, how do you figure out the distinction between outcomes and outputs and impact and things like that. All right. So our workshop series, the major technical part of it really starts on the 27th of May. And this has an application process. So for application, you have to go to www.recycle.com/BRSR. So on the bottom left of the slide, you can see that link. Aditi, I would recommend if you could also post that link on the chat box over here for the benefit of the audience. And then we have a second application deadline on the 21st of May. We are planning to have no more than 20 to 30 people in the cohort. So we would have limited seats and we would encourage people who are working either as sustainability consultants or in startups and companies who are working on sustainability agendas or sustainability reporting agendas. Those are the sort of people we are looking for who would benefit from this particular workshop. All right. So now a little bit about Recykal. Essentially, this is a workshop series which is hosted by Recykal, and we have structured it almost like a fellowship program, which essentially means that you would be not only learning from the mentors or the instructors, but there'll also be a lot of peer learning within this particular program. And Recykal has conceptualized this idea along with us to really have a community of people who understand the importance of sustainability reporting. Now, Recykal is a first of its kind software solution provider for waste management. It's essentially a waste aggregator that connects waste generators, waste recyclers, and plays a very important role in bridging the gap between demand and supply in this whole waste management ecosystem. It has been recognized as a technology pioneer by the World Economic Forum and has also been a recipient of the Circulate Capital Oceans Fund and honored as Grant Thornton Sabera Award winner as a responsible business of the year. So Recykal is doing some tremendous work in this particular field, and we are absolutely thrilled to be partnering with them. And we really appreciate their initiative on organizing a workshop series, which would really benefit the whole of the ecosystem in sustainability reporting. So now coming to sustainability reporting, coming to BRSR. So what is BRSR? And it is essentially a reporting system, a framework for Indian companies to report on their sustainability practices. Right now, BRSR reporting standards only apply to 1,000 companies which are listed on the Indian stock market, which are listed, and this is a requirement for those companies mandated by SEBI. Now, we are at a very early level. We are at a very early stage in India where we are just about to start and take ESG reporting in the form of BRSR seriously. And in doing so, typically, we have selected a model where most of these reporting requirements start from fairly large companies, so 1,000 companies, as you see over there. And eventually, the idea is that it would trickle down to a lot of other companies. Eventually, the vision of the government of India is that this particular ESG reporting requirements is going to trickle down to each and every company in the world. Now, why is the government doing it? What is the internal logic? We will cover some of that in a workshop series that is going to be delivered by a former OSD to the Union Minister of Environment and Forestries in India. The global aspects of it, that globally how some of these accounting standards are becoming the norm, and what role do they really play in facilitating international trade, etc., is something that we will discuss with Curtis a little bit, something that I would cover in my workshop, in addition to talking about a lot more other things around the technicalities of reporting. Okay, so BRSR reporting in India has only started in a proper way last year. So we have just 1 year where all of these 1,000 companies have submitted their reports. And the interesting part about this is that a lot of these companies thought that this is going to be, an effort which is going to be cost intensive, which is going to be human resource intensive, and something which is extremely, extremely difficult. But the responses which are coming from all of these organizations, at least right now, is that it is less costly than they expected it to be, and it has helped them think about their business model in a much more effective manner. Because if they want to develop business models which are in line with the market needs of the future and the public policy expectations of the future, this is a model that really helps them think through some of these aspects. And how this has evolved, we'd cover all of that in workshops. All right. So now, eventually, and if I can request everybody to kindly stay on mute, other than asking me a question right now. So it promotes transparency and accountability amongst companies in sustainability practices. And by transparency and accountability, what we really mean is that every company gets to know about where the other company stands in terms of their sustainability practices. It bridges the information asymmetry, and which really helps businesses take a good stock of what sort of an environmental impact they are having across the value chain. Now, globally, what you see happening, and this is something which is very important from the Indian perspective, is that if you look at some of the geographies such as the European Union, you would see that European Union from the 1st of October this month is going to be implementing the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM. And that really means that any product that enters into the borders of the European Union would be subjected to a carbon tax if it is not able to show that all of that product and the material, etc., has been produced in a carbon-friendly manner, which means that any of the companies, especially 20% of Indian exports are to Europe, they would have to be reporting whether they come under BRSR or they don't. They would have to be reporting on what sort of carbon footprint that this company has created in the pursuit of producing this product. Now, eventually what we expect is that India and other countries will come up with their carbon border adjustment mechanisms of their own. And that's on the international trade side. Even internally, now there's going to, India has a carbon market, which is a bill which has been passed in the parliament. And with that, companies which are adopting and are able to report on their sustainability practices and their carbon footprint would be able to get various incentives from the government, including being able to trade on the carbon market in India. So essentially, this workshop series that we are organizing right now is useful for any company which is looking and preparing to take advantage of all of these sustainability related compliance requirements, but also the incentives that come along with them. Now, increasingly, and I'm sure that the startup community over here would realize that many of the investors and many of the development finance organizations as well are looking for investing in startups which are environmentally responsible. Now, there are a number of investors who have included sustainability related reporting and carbon footprint, etc., in their investment criteria. So to take advantage of all of these things, and even to be able to partner up with organizations which are sensitive, which are large enough, but which are also sensitive with regards to sustainability and with regards to ESG, having some of these skills that we will discuss in our 4-part workshop series would be extremely, extremely important. So what is this that we are doing? This is going to be a 4-part workshop series. Each workshop is going to be around 2 hours each. This is really a 2-weekend program broadly. So, this starts on one Saturday and Sunday and ends on the following Saturday and Sunday. So that's how it has been broadly structured. Now, it is useful for CSR professionals, for sustainability professionals, even for finance auditors, etc., who are now looking at sustainability as an area to apply their auditing and financial management skills to. Typically, very important for CEOs to plan strategy for their organizations, and in general for younger professionals who want to specialize in this particular aspect of ESG consulting. So this is going to be a series of workshops which really helps you build some of those skills. It's got practical modules which would really get you to sit down in groups and prepare some of these reports for companies. So eventually, when you come out of this particular workshop, not only will you know the broad global landscape and the Indian policy landscape around ESG reporting, you will also gain hands-on experience in identifying how that reporting is done and identifying certain loopholes and best practices with case studies and examples on how it is done across the country and across the world. So that's what this workshop series is about. Now, as to the content of the workshop, what you would see is that the first session, which is going to be after Curtis's session, that's on the 27th, is going to be more about giving you a broad overview, giving you an understanding of various reporting standards. So there is GRI, there is SABESP, there is BRSR, there are so many different standards all over the world. And how do they compare? What sort of standards are a better fit for which sorts of companies? And what are the various materiality and risk factors in choosing all of these standards? So that's going to be the topic of the first workshop. The second workshop is really going to be around ESG reporting fundamentals, how ESG reporting has happened in India, some of the assessment of how this policy has evolved and where it is going, and through a particular model of impact evaluation, understanding the fundamentals or understanding the pitfalls or the loopholes or some of the shortcomings of existing practices in reporting on ESG. A lot of times you would find that reporting happens in India and abroad, but there is no clear way to measure a particular objective. And whenever companies all the time, they pitch to the investors, they have created all of these reports, but then they really don't have the right things that the investors are looking for. So a lot of times there are confusions related to very basic things such as outputs and outcomes and impact, and some very important things around monitoring practices, evaluation practices that companies miss out on. So we are going to be giving out some practice and covering some fundamentals in the second workshop on how do you actually do these evaluations. So that's where we jump in on the policy and the technical bit. The third workshop is really going to be a deep dive into BRSR. So how is BRSR reporting done? And this is also going to be tied to a practicum, which means a practical exercise that you do in groups within the class. And in that exercise, what you would do is to really come up with the essential elements of a BRSR report for a particular organization. That's what the third workshop is going to be about. Now, the fourth workshop is again going to be around covering some of the technical bits, but also to make sense of summing up what you've learned in all of the previous three workshops and giving you a view of how BRSR and ESG reporting standards are evolving in India and what you can expect from the government, from the civil society and the private sector in terms of action on ESG and ESG reporting. So that's what fourth workshop is, more like a sum up and more of a sneak peek into where this whole ecosystem is headed. But it's not just about these workshops. What we are trying to do over here is to almost create a fellowship of sorts where people who are attending this workshop series can come together and interact on almost a day-to-day basis. So we will have networking sessions, we'd have interactive sessions, we'd have things what we call something like a virtual cafe, which is essentially going to be a place to collaborate, to ideate on various things, and to get various organizations together to network and see what they can do for each other and how they can learn about ESG reporting in a more effective manner. A lot of it is also going to be fun. So we are going to be having, running WhatsApp groups, running Slack groups. We'd have somebody to manage alumni relations once you graduate. And we are going to be sharing various resources related to the workshop, not only through this 2 weeks when this workshop takes place, but also beyond that. And the idea is to create this whole ecosystem that understands ESG and can become a leader in the conversation of ESG in the future in India and across the world, really. So we'd have those interactive sessions, and then at the end of this, we'd have a convocation ceremony, and we already know who's speaking in the convocation for this workshop series. You'd be handed over your certificate by Mr. Elliot Harris, who's the Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development and Chief Economist at United Nations. So this is broadly the structure of the workshop, the schedule of the workshop. Okay. Now, a little bit about who are going to be the mentors. Now, the reason why I'm not just calling them workshop facilitators and mentors is because they're not just going to be here and deliver one particular lecture. These are people that we would put you in touch with, and you can remain in touch with them, and they would every now and then, usually they are extremely open, and they would be happy to support you through your ideation and through your ideas on various projects, and also happy to advise you on how your organization's ESG journey is going. All right. So our mentors are the following. You would today meet Mr. Curtis Raynold. He's the former secretary of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament Matters. He is also the principal consultant at Curtis Raynold Consulting. He's a person who's worked for a long time with Kofi Annan. And I would read out his detailed bio when he is here so that you have a fair context on his experience and what he can bring to the table in terms of giving us an overview around BRSR and ESG reporting in general. We would also have an interactive session with Ms. Parul Agarwala. Parul is the country program manager of India at the UN Habitat. The convocation, as I already told you, is going to be Mr. Elliot Harris. He's the Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development and Chief Economist at United Nations. Then one of your workshops would be delivered by Mr. Ankit Srivastav. Ankit is the co-founder and CEO of Climajo, graduated from the Indian Institute of Technology and the London Business School, is based out of London, and has a lot of presence in the ESG conversations across the world. So Ankit would be one of your mentors. Then Miss Ekta Kumar, and Ekta has been for the longest time the ESG country head for Shell, and also she was the general manager for corporate citizenship and ESG for Southwest Asia for Samsung Electronics. And then you have me, in addition to my work as a policy consultant and a sustainability consultant. I also teach. I've taught at the San Francisco State University, studied at Cornell, and since then have been doing a number of consulting related projects related to tech policy, sustainability, and government relations, and a lot of international development work, which includes getting businesses on the track of sustainability and ESG. Then we have Mr. Dhruv Sharma, who was the additional private secretary to the Honorable Union Minister of the Government of India, as I told you earlier. And that is broadly what we have in terms of this particular workshop series. This is absolutely the bare basics. I'm happy to take your questions, or if you have any thoughts, any comments, we are more than happy to take those right now. More details are available on the website. You already have the link to the website. You would have the whole of the schedule up here on the website and a lot of FAQs, but this is also a good time to discuss some of your questions, discuss some of your thoughts before we invite Curtis over. So Curtis will join us in about 15 to 20 minutes. But before that, we can discuss more around this workshop and also close on some of our remaining introductions. So over to you guys. Okay, so I'm going to invite some of us for introductions, the folks who were left. So let me get Kevalia, Swati, Saloni, if you might want to introduce yourself very quickly.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Valia. So I work in Bureau Veritas as a sustainability executive. So I've worked in many various projects in sustainability, including ESG, as well as, carbon footprint and many more. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And where are you based out of, Kevalia?
Mumbai.
Mumbai. Great. Yeah. And
Thank
Swati or Saloni?
Yeah, hey, this is Saloni. It's so nice to be with everybody here. I can see that we're really in the group with people that really care about sustainability, and that's really important for us to come together. So really happy to be here. Thank you for this amazing initiative. I work alongside Martin at Snowcap in marketing, and I've been in the sustainability communication space for a couple of years now.
Awesome, awesome. And what got you interested in this particular workshop? I see that you're a communication consultant, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think since this is such a new concept, I think it's important for, from the communication point of view to understand the different, points of view of, various people that are involved in this process. I think it's really to understand what some of the challenges are, some of the opportunities are, and, this is an invaluable forum for something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And let me get Tapan, Vandit, Prabhu. If any of you want to introduce yourself, and guys, please feel free to ask your questions about the workshop series. We'll be happy to answer those as well.
Hi guys, This is Tapan from Haridwar, and recently we're taking over the Haridwar MRF here, and definitely all the things we are planning and discussing here will be also implementing all the ground situations, also looking after that. Definitely
Awesome.
this workshop will be eye-opening for us, and we'll be definitely learning from it a lot.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tapan, and interesting place and some very interesting work that you're doing. So we look forward to seeing you at the workshop series.
Yes.
Yes. And Pandit, if you're there, or Aisha. Okay, then otherwise we'll get Juhi, Sondarya, Isabel.
Hi everyone, I'm Juhi. I'm Director South Asia Markets at Tetra Pak. I lead the sustainability agenda, primarily driving EPR, collection recycling for paper-based cartons. Before this, I was with PepsiCo leading their sustainability agenda. So happy to be in this call to learn from others and also contribute to the forum.
Sure, Juhi. And have you already been involved in some of the BRSR reporting that's happened last year?
I've been part of it because some of our partners have been filing BRSR reporting, including our franchisee partners. And we've been working with Recykal on some of the collection recycling efforts for plastics. So yes, I'm familiar with this space.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Juhi, for joining us. And let's say Aisha and Aisha, Donna, Sudeep. If any of you are available to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm Sudeep Dam. I'm basically from Kolkata. I'm associated with one of the IT company in Kolkata. I'm in EHS department of that company.
In the EHS department?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Sudeep. And okay, so let me see who else we have. We have Purvi over here, Ibtisim and Bhavesh, if you want to introduce yourself. And maybe
hi.
after that, we'll talk a little bit more. Hi, Ibtisim. How are you?
Hi everyone. I'm Ibtisam from Tunisia. I'm senior project manager. I'm member of Global ABC, is the leading global platform for all building stakeholders for zero emission, efficient and resilient buildings and construction. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Ibtisim. And what got you interested in the ESG workshop that we are hosting over here? A lot of the people are in this particular workshop going to be of Indian origin, and BRSR is primarily focused on India, but as you can see, that ESG agenda is something that is, this particular workshop series is sort of BRSR++. That's how we've designed it. But I'm just interested in knowing what got you to apply for it.
So, really, I'm new. I study ESG. I'm study ESG. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
I found very interesting what you present. So I try
Awesome.
to be with you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
All right. So, okay, Purvi, you're traveling. That's absolutely fine. Okay. So in that case, let us talk a little bit more about, what this particular workshop series is going to be about. And Curtis is going to be joining us in about 15 minutes from now. So, please do think about the various topics that you might want to discuss with them. I can tell you the things that I am going to be discussing with Curtis are mostly going to be around how ESG will help businesses. How is the global governance structure evolving around ESG? And how has his experience working in the UN and having hosting a lot of delegations from different countries, obviously delegations of both governments and businesses, has informed his perspective on ESG reporting, or his vision on where this whole ecosystem is going forward. So we're going to be discussing that with Curtis. A little bit, let me take you through the workshop content on what we are going to be covering. Okay, so on a week-by-week basis. So today, as you can see, is Curtis's workshop. Then week 2, you're going to see Ankit and myself, and Ankit will bring the focus on Indian compliance requirements, but also cover a lot of the various standards like GRI, SABESP, BRSR, and compare which one works best for what sort of companies. And some of these take a sectoral approach, some of these take a common approach to reporting, and it is important for companies to understand which particular approach works the best for them. You can, as you can see, go to the website, navigate through what each and every workshop is going to entail, and you would be able to see that there is a fair bit of detail on the website. If you go to the Learn More option, there's a fair bit of detail on what each workshop will entail on a minute-to-minute basis. So this would be really comparing all of these standards, as I already told you, some of the core concepts around materiality and risk, understanding what ESG is after all, and why is it important. And then a little bit of an activity to compare and map GRI and SABESP principles of reporting, and a mapping exercise on a mind mapping software to figure out what sort of standards are there and how do they compare to each other, followed by a particular discussion on which is suitable for what industry. So that's really what's going to be covered in our workshop with Ankit. The second one is mine, and in my workshop, we would be covering a lot of, we would be deep diving into a lot of things around this particular framework called the VMCL framework. And this is a great reporting framework developed by Professors Derek and Laura Cabrera at the Cornell University, which essentially says that whenever you're talking about sustainability, whenever you're talking about any of these reportings, actually it applies as well to financial reporting or to sustainability reporting, you first need to set up a vision, and there are certain rules to have that vision, so that the activity that you're doing is strategic and not just tactical, that you're not just blindly reporting on things, but you're understanding the whole of the vision of your ESG strategy and activity. And then you get to the mission elements. Mission elements essentially are the things that you do over and over and over again to achieve your vision. Then you look at what capacity systems do you have to implement your ESG strategy, and your learning framework. So how do you adapt? How do you adjust with the changing requirements of the world, of the market, and have evaluation parameters for your vision, for your mission, for your capacity, and for your learning. And then we look at some of the best practices in program evaluation and project evaluation, and conduct some activities based on number of UN evaluations on figuring out some of the pitfalls, some of the issues that usually emerge in evaluating some of these projects or reporting on ESG. And there we're going to be talking about log frames, which is a technical framework, a logical framework, which is really able to lay out for an investor or for a government assessor what are the activities, what are the outputs, what are the outcomes, and what's the impact of this sort of thing that the initiatives that your company is taking. Then we're going to talk about the 9 principles of ESG reporting in India as per the National Voluntary Guidelines, objectives of BRSR, and then just getting to understand the anatomy of BRSR a little bit, that what does the whole reporting framework look like, what are the objectives, what are its various sections, etc., etc. And in the next workshop, what you would see is that we would deep dive into that. That's the third one. This is going to be taken up by Ekta, and a very, very powerful leader with a lot of attention to detail. And this is going to be the practicum where she's going to be talking about the details of BRSR requirements, and then giving you a case-based activity where you sit down in groups and actually come up with a BRSR report based on each of the sections as per the mandated guidelines. And Ekta, since she has a lot of experience with various organizations, including Samsung and Shell on ESG reporting, will share. And she also sits on various councils with CII, with FICCI, etc. So she would be talking about the best practices of implementation, best practices of reporting, etc. In this particular workshop as well. Finally, you would have a session with Dhruv, and Dhruv will bring in more of the policy aspect of it, but also talking to you about what's the difference between BRSR light versus comprehensive, sharing some observations from the BRSR reporting in the first year. So 2021 to 2022 is when the first set of reports have arrived, and sharing with you what has worked, what has not worked, and what sort of new approaches to BRSR reporting are evolving. So that's what he's going to be covering and giving you a sense of where we've been through in these 2 weekends. Eventually, what we would do is that in the last week, we would have an interactive session with Ms. Parul Agarwala, and Parul would be talking about her work with UN Habitat, but also around how this whole agenda around green cities and smart cities, etc., tie into opportunities for the corporates who are sustainable, and about the Urban National Priority Program, her experiences of that, and how some of those learnings could also be applied to ESG reporting in India. So that's what Parul is going to be talking about, after which eventually, if you've completed your practicum, if you've completed all of your workshops, you would be given a certificate of completion, and then you would be added to our alumni group before we introduce a new group again. And the idea would be to develop this ecosystem every time we learn more about ESG and the technical aspects of reporting and the policy aspects of it. So that's broadly the lay of the land over here. Any particular question or any thoughts I'm happy to take, or we can jump into more introductions. I think Curtis is now joining us in about 5 minutes from now. So any questions, please do shoot away. I see some familiar faces over here. Hi, Vanessa. How are you doing? Okay, so let's jump into some more introductions by the time Curtis joins us. So how about we have Sneha, Vivek, and Girish. Sneha, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Or Girish, or Sainath?
Hi,
Girish.
everyone. Yeah, my name is Girish. Yeah, Girish.
Hi, Girish. Yeah.
Yeah, I work for Recykal. So I work in the marketplace sector for mainly the plastic scrap and business development.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, Girish. And I saw Vivek also unmuting himself. So Vivek, if you might want to introduce yourself.
Hello, hi. I'm Vivek Yadav. I'm working with the product tech team at Recykal. and working on the DRS and these circular economy things.
Awesome. Well, great. Welcome, Vivek. And Aditi, it seems that Curtis will take about 5 minutes to join us. So we'll take a 5-minute break. So it's 7:22 p.m. by India time. And if we can all, reconvene, you don't necessarily have to leave the room. You can stay over here, and Curtis will join us at somewhere around 7:28. So that's when we start with our interaction with him. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, I'm going to be around. Otherwise, we reconvene in about 5 minutes from now. And after this, Aditi has also shared a brief feedback form. So after the discussion with Curtis, you can submit your feedback form over here, and that also helps us stay in touch with you and assess how we can improve some of our workshops in the future. So, all right, thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you in about 5 minutes from now. All right, so we have Mr. Curtis Raynold here with us. Curtis, a very big welcome to you. If you can hear me, we would request you to kindly turn on your video and...
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Curtis, and welcome to our discussion on ESG reporting and the importance of it throughout the world. Hello, everybody. Once again, Arpit Chaturvedi, and I'll be hosting this fireside chat with Mr. Curtis Raynold. Feel free to introduce yourself to Curtis in the Q&A session and ask a lot of questions. Without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Curtis Raynold and his work to everybody in attendance over here. Mr. Raynold is a UN veteran, having spent nearly 3 decades in the UN system, serving in various UN agencies. He was appointed by Secretary General Kofi Annan as the Secretary of his Advisory Committee on Disarmament Affairs, and was elected by the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to serve on the United Nations Global Central Review Board. He has also served as a member in the Stakeholder Selection Committee of the United Nations General Assembly's Nelson Mandela Peace Summit. He champions sustainable development and has been a speaker and lecturer in various prestigious fora, including Harvard University, Columbia University, Central European University, and others. He serves on various advisory boards, including as a mentor and career advisor at the International Affairs Committee at the Harvard Kennedy School, and as a senior advisor at the Hay Institute, Washington, D.C. Curtis, thank you so much for joining us, and it is indeed a privilege to have you over here with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Arpit. It's also a pleasure for me to be invited to this August forum to share my views on ESG. I'm not a business expert, but I'm an economist by training. I did my bachelor's degree in economics, so I have a fairly good understanding of the importance of issues related to ESG and how it impacts businesses around the world. So I will share my views and
sure.
Expect to get some very hard-hitting questions in response.
Well, yes, we do expect those from our audience as well. Okay, so I'm going to start with a very general question, Curtis, and this is that what are some of the key benefits that businesses can realize from having a strong ESG reporting strategy? Like, why are we doing it after all, and why should a business think of it as an opportunity and rather than just being a burden?
Well, I think, let's say about 50, 60 years ago, it was all about businesses making profits to satisfy the needs and wants of their shareholders. Nowadays, within the past, I think since the early 2000s, the requirement to have an ESG proposition in a business framework has become more and more clear. It's has been an emerging trend which has reached somewhat overwhelming proportions. There are many benefits that businesses can accrue from having an ESG proposition. For example, nowadays, I think it would be a sort of impossible proposition to go into business in the 21st century without having an ESG proposition. First of all, if you have an ESG strategy and you report it in a very transparent manner, there are enormous benefits to be accrued by your business. First of all, you will be open to many business opportunities. You will be able to attract investors, because the investors nowadays, as opposed to 50, 60 years ago, they are more savvy. They want to make sure that when they put their money into your business, that it will be the sort of business that will have a positive impact on the environment, on the society, and also on the governance of the business itself. In order for you to have an effective ESG proposition, you have to have systems in place within the business that will encourage or scaffold or engender the sort of let's say mindset within the business to support the goals of an ESG. In the United States, where I'm based, ESG reporting is not exactly mandatory, but it is becoming more and more of a requirement. I think 80% of businesses, even without any regulatory demands, are putting out publicizing their ESG propositions, so that to provide a level of transparency. There's a lot of so as I was saying, there are many benefits from having an ESG proposition. It helps you cut costs. An ESG reporting helps you manage risks, because when you put out a report, you will be subject to criticism. That will open up opportunities for you to identify the risks involved. You're also making a positive impact on the society, which is good for your brand. It improves and enhances your brand loyalty. And it also helps you improve productivity. When you have an ESG proposition, at least a viable and well put together proposition, you attract some of the best employees. You don't want employees, the type of employees who are basically like mercenaries who just out for grabbing a profit, as they say in Nigeria, chopping everyone. You want someone you want the sort of employees who have the welfare of the wider society in mind. And if you have enough of those type of employees, you will attract numerous benefits. As I was saying before, your brand, the power of your brand will improve substantially. So there are many benefits from having an ESG proposition. And it's not just about imposing restrictions on your manner of operation. It definitely has. I think McKinsey in 2016 or 17 did some research, and it shows that that having an ESG proposition does not produce a drag on your value, on value added, but to the contrary, it increases your value added. So at this point, I will stop for any questions. And
Sure. I will have some follow-up questions for you, Curtis, before we open it up to the audience. My other question to you is that you mentioned about business risks, and I was talking to some insurance companies a couple of days back, and they gave me this really interesting example on how, when earlier there were certain hurricanes in the US, I think it was somewhere on the southeastern coast, where a lot of insurance agencies came almost close to bankruptcy during that particular time, because that was not the time where the housing projects, etc., would be reporting on climate risk or on what they're doing on ESG and things like that. And typically the financial sector now or any investor now wants to absorb or wants to have a fair sense of the climate related risks and wants to absorb that into their cost when they are investing. So I thought that was a very interesting strategy. I thought that that's a very interesting trend, because typically people would think that the financial sector is a laggard, but they are usually ahead of the curve in reporting or in understanding the importance of reporting on sustainability related issues. My question to you over here is that what's really the relationship between risk and ESG reporting, and how can businesses benefit from ESG reporting in terms of risk management overall?
Well, yeah, I alluded to risk management earlier. What I was saying was that with an ESG strategy and an ESG report, you are opening up yourself to scrutiny. And first of all, you will have the opportunity. It's a window of opportunity. It should not be seen as a negative matter, but a window of opportunity to invite criticism so that you will improve your approach to ESG issues. And also in preparing your report, you will be forced to consider many of the risks. 50, 60 years ago, when ESG was not an issue, you could hide as much as you want, but now there's an increasing importance being seen for being transparent.
Yeah.
So when you're transparent, you open up yourself to criticism, and you also have opportunities to see the risks involved for your company and for your company's bottom line, which is what it's all about in the final analysis. Yes.
But don't you think, Curtis, that opening oneself to some of this criticism would also serve as a potential disincentive for businesses to be reporting on some of these things, at least in the developing countries?
Well, the developing countries have a little ways to go in terms of their mindset with regard to exposing themselves or exposing the risks that they face.
Sure.
But it is something that they will have to increasingly have to deal with, because the more developed countries are doing it, and the developing countries will have to follow suit eventually, because that if you don't, I don't like to call it a bandwagon, but if you don't join what is becoming more and more of a mainstream, you will distinguish yourself from the others in a very negative way. So it's something you have to do, and something you have to deal with.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I see Ms. Aishwarya Kandaswamy, your hand is up, so over to you.
Thank you, Arpit. Good day, Mr. Curtis. I'm Aishwarya Kandaswamy, a practicing lawyer and a GPOTS alum as well. So my question is kind of a follow-up to Arpit's question, and I would love to hear answer from both of you. Like India is a country where like lots of startups are emerging, and we are coming up with lots of policies imposing certain requirements from industries and businesses. So what exact mechanism do we have in place to scrutinize these reports, especially ESG reports, to check the veracity of the reports that are being submitted? And as Arpit mentioned, like, won't it be another, like Mr. Curtis mentioned that in most places it is not mandatory, and lots of firms want to submit ESG reports to, show themselves sustainable. So won't it be another tool to, where businesses can tweak their figures and greenwash the consumers as well as investors? How is it exactly prevented?
So, Mr. Raynold, do you want to take that first, or do you want me to jump in and then you want to follow up on that?
Well, I think that if national legislatures want to start imposing ESG requirements on businesses, at least the key businesses, they should in fact have mechanisms within the legislation to ensure the veracity of the information that is being provided. Even without that, I think there are many watchdogs within many jurisdictions. I'm sure India is well placed with a very strong civil society when it comes to environmental issues. They will definitely be sort of inadvertent or informal watchdogs on the businesses. But I think if you are going to introduce legislation, you have to introduce measures within those regulations to ensure that the information that the companies are providing about the ESG strategies, aims, goals, results are in fact bona fide and easily verifiable.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And Ishwarya, if I were to add to what Mr. Raynold has said, I would ask the question that what are really norms there for? So we set up all of these norms. Sometimes they get enshrined into laws or regulations, such as BRSR has become a regulation over here in India for at least the top 1,000 listed companies, and it's going to expand. But if you look at the fact that norms are there to facilitate common expectations of cooperation around a certain agenda with all of the players involved in a particular ecosystem. So if you remember earlier, there were norms that SEBI in India had produced around having only a certain number of family members in a particular business, or in many countries there are norms of having a board which has some sort of a gender balance. In Germany, etc., it is enshrined into the law. Now typically what that does is that it shows a commitment that everybody has to, the society collectively has to come together and work towards this particular agenda, and that expectation triggers a chain throughout the ecosystem. So if you're a company and if you're dealing with another company which does not, let's say, have a gender balanced board, or which does not follow the ESG norms, etc., eventually you may not want to deal with that particular company, because you would expect that other companies may not want to deal with that particular company because they are doing something going against the norm. And now when you look at the fact that India has made and most of the countries have made commitments at the various COP conferences that we will be reducing our carbon footprint and working with the agenda. India has given 2070 as the deadline. These are some of the ways of operationalizing those ambitions, because without the private sector and without the private sector cooperating around the norms of ESG, that's not going to happen. So this is really something that the government of India is serious about. And as you would see, that this is something that the government of India would expect in terms of norms, in terms of regulations, in terms of legislation from most of the companies that operate in India. And it's not just costs, as you were mentioning, it's also related to benefits. So if you don't comply, there are costs, but if you do comply, there are benefits such as trading on the carbon markets, etc., etc. So that's going to be my response. If there are any other questions, guys, please do jump in. And meanwhile, Curtis, I have my next question for you, which is related to, there are many businesses, especially in India, which are really new to ESG reporting. And this is something which is In the US, I'm sure this is happening for many, many years now. In India, yes, there have been some companies for which this has been a standard practice for almost a decade now, if not more. But for the majority of the companies, this whole ESG reporting mechanism is pretty new. So can you share any advice for newer businesses to get comfortable with this particular strategy? But because as you can imagine that for newer businesses, a whole shift in mindset and requires some sort of capacity of consultants, etc., coming in to do that.
Well, my simple answer to that question is something that I alluded to earlier on. ESG reporting is becoming more and more increasingly becoming mandatory, whether from a moral standpoint or from a regulatory standpoint. So whether those emerging businesses or smaller businesses coming out into the fore, like it or not, it is something they will have to deal with. As I said, they risk becoming a minority, sort of a negative minority, if they try to avoid it. So you want to, as I said before, you want to be distinguishing yourself. You don't want to distinguish yourself in a negative way. So therefore you have to align yourself with the mainstream, the emerging well, I shouldn't say emerging mainstream, but a sort of a groundswell movement in the mainstream. If you want to survive in the 21st and even the 22nd century. Yeah,
absolutely. So, which is essentially saying that the businesses will have to think of a way to conduct their reporting, and it is, I'm sure, on the private sector to figure out on how to do it in the most cost-effective manner and how to benefit out of that eventually.
So I think a lot of business education will be needed to sort of move the mindset from ESG being seen as restrictive to a point where businesses see ESG reporting and ESG proposition being something that will positively benefit the business bottom line, which is what it's all about.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're saying that eventually, this is not really something that goes against the bottom line aspirations of businesses, because that is always going to be there, but it would probably just nudge ever so lightly the businesses in the direction of achieving their bottom lines, but in an environmentally responsible manner. And let me take you back to some of the experiences from your days at the UN. My question is that how has your experience of working with the UN influenced your perspective on the importance of ESG reporting for business?
Well, the United Nations is all about the United Nations Charter provides a guideline as to how governments and nations govern their relations with each other. It's all about a set of rules that you follow. They don't necessarily always follow them, but I think the United Nations can provide some useful guidelines. One of the first things that any business that wants to receive guidance from the UN can become part of the Global Compact, which is a framework within which businesses get guidance with regard to the adoption of environmentally friendly ways of operating. And there is also something called the UN Global. Well, I mentioned the UN Global Compact. there's also the UN Guiding Principles Reporting Framework. That's the UNGPRF, which governs ethical governance and issues relating to human rights. So the UN has a framework which is in alignment with ESG principles and goals.
Sure.
So I believe the UN can provide some useful guidance to businesses with respect to formulating effective and transparent ESG propositions. Yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And in a lot of ways, what we see is that whether it's the Sustainable Development Goals or whether it is the ESG agenda, the UN comes across as a thought leader and an entity with a lot of convening power to get the businesses and the governments and the civil society to sit down together and talk in that regard. Curtis, last question from my side before we open it out to the audience, and that's also my cue to the members in the audience to keep your questions prepared in your mind. So my question is that how do you see ESG reporting evolving in the future, and what trends should businesses be aware of just to ensure their growth and prosperity in the future?
Thank you, Apit. One thing for sure is that ESG reporting, I believe, will become mandatory in more and more countries from a regulatory national legislation perspective.
Sure.
Right now, there is a moral obligation, mostly. I know India has introduced legislation from what I've been hearing.
Yes.
But its legislative regulatory frameworks will become more and more prevalent. That's the trend that I expect to see. So that will help to bolster the sort of moral obligation that businesses, governments, and the wider society has now in terms of protecting the environment and supporting or scaffolding sustainability.
No, absolutely. And which also makes me think that it would also open up a whole new set of careers for professionals who are trained to conduct some of these, ESG assessments and reporting and analysis to support this overall effort at a global level. Yeah. All right. So since we want to make it a very open and interactive session, I would really encourage the audience to ask your questions. Please do introduce yourself and feel free to pose all of your hard-hitting questions to Curtis. So I see Jay's hand up already. So Jay, over to you.
Hello, Mr. Curtis. Thank you for your remarks. And I have a question around leadership. So my question is, how do a company or let's say an industry should attract, develop and retain the leadership, talent and the skills needed to drive the ESG strategy for the companies? What are the key elements where they should identify, okay, so this leader could be the real driver who can take ahead the company's ESG strategy, leadership with identifying the right talent? Because a lot of companies do lack identifying the right talent and identifying the right leadership skills towards ESG.
I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly, but I think I sort of got it towards the end. I believe that governments can easily find the talent they want to support the regulation of ESGs. As I alluded to earlier on, I believe India is quite fertile territory for talent there's a lot of talent within the wider civil society from which the governments can draw on for insights, high quality insights into how an ESG proposition or strategy should be formulated. So I don't think governments would have a problem really. What you may need to do is that the government may have to sort of broaden the outlook so as not to allow it to get in the way of recruiting quality talent. That's my major fear, is that governments usually have other agendas, and sometimes they're a little bit wary of the so-called activists within the wider civil society. But I think there's a large pool of high quality talents that can be drawn from. So government shouldn't have a problem finding people.
Absolutely. So the clear answer over there is that, the talent is there. And I think that there are a lot of complementary fields. So people who've already been working in sustainability, but people who've been working in auditing, in HR, and in CSR, etc., they could really understand the broad contours of ESG and can upgrade their skills by learning some of these reporting standards and reporting techniques to add one more competency to their overall skill set. I see Sakshana's hand up. So Ms. Sakshana Bhatt, if you could introduce yourself and ask your question over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arpit, and thank you so much, Mr. Raynold, for joining us today. The question I had was, so we obviously know that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are the benchmark for ESG reporting standards. What would you say are the major pros and cons to that?
Major pros and cons. I would say that major pros and cons would be something I referred to earlier, would be negative mindsets, really. But I think that as the years go by and issues such as ESG concerns become more and more prominent within the wider scheme of things, there will be a groundswell of support for it. And of course, that would also assist greatly in promoting the UN SDGs.
And if I can add some of the common challenges that we see when we talk to businesses around this section is, from a UN SDG goals perspective, a lot of times it seems that all of the SDGs and those targets are so interrelated that you cannot, possibly address all of them. Similarly, a similar sort of problem exists with ESG, because there are questions around what counts as key, the environmental part. So what is climate, what is green, what is just environment? Those sort of distinctions become important over there. A lot of people argue that climate is just something which is related to carbon. Okay. But then, okay, what about ocean salination or acidification of oceans or the rise of sea levels? Eventually, that's because there is a lot of carbon emission, which leads to global warming, which leads to some of these effects, which may have effects on biodiversity, on life underwater, etc. Now, do you consider that climate, or do you consider that as just broad environment or green? Okay. So those questions become very important, and these are some of the things that we want to discuss in our workshop. Similarly, the S part, as I already said, there are 17 SDGs, and understanding the interconnections of those and understanding their targets is quite an ordeal itself. So those are, sometimes, having some sort of a facility in understanding the distinctions and interrelations between these concepts is very, very important. Kunal, I'll come over to you.
Thanks, Arpit. Hi, Mr. Raynold. Was wonderful hearing you speak. I represent a ESG tech company based in India. So my question is relevant to the kind of work that I do. So my question is that what role do you see as technology playing in the broader ESG reporting landscape going forward? So, yeah.
I think technology, for better or for worse, always has a role in anything we do. And I believe that ESG can benefit greatly from improved technology. There are benefits for innovation, technological innovation within the context of ESG. That's one of the benefits I sort of missed out talking earlier. But they're great. So technology can be leveraged to the greatest extent in order to promote ESG goals. There's no question about it. Technology can be used for good, it can be used for evil, but there are opportunities, windows of opportunities for enhancement of technology. There's definitely a place for the leveraging of technology to the benefit of ESG.
Absolutely. And
thanks.
Kunal, if I can just add a little to that, now you see all of these very interesting models of tech platforms or tech solutions using artificial intelligence to recommend strategies to companies on how they can increase their ESG scores, or what sort of activities should they be undertaking, so that if you basically have a broad metrics uploaded into the logic of the software, it'll tell you that, okay, what's the sort of environmental risk that you're facing, or what are some of the actions that you could be taking. So a lot of the work that regular consultants would be doing sometimes is done by technology now. And increasingly, I'm seeing a lot of these platforms coming up, advising investment firms, etc., on geography-based climate risk, and advising them on which geographies to invest in, which geographies to not, and sort of integrating that risk into the model. So technology, I think, has a very important role to play over there. The question would be that, okay, to what extent would technology take over the role of the consultants? And that's anybody's guess right now. I personally believe that eventually a lot of what technology is doing, a lot of it would replace some sort of consulting, but as long as you're consulting on the strategic level, that's not something that technology can do a very good role of it in terms of, it can give you some decision-making parameters, but look at ChatGPT, it probably knows more than any person over here, but ChatGPT cannot make inference. ChatGPT cannot do a lot of that stuff. So that's where, again, is consulting or any sort of, that's my understanding.
Yeah, I don't think that artificial intelligence will really eliminate the work of consultants. I think that the work of consultants will always be important. I think what artificial intelligence does, it provides innovative tools which the consultant can then leverage. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that can really replace human intelligence. I have been impressed by some of the things that artificial intelligence can do, but not 100% impressed. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times it is just falls short of expectations. Not that it is not doing something wonderful already, but a lot of times it does fall short of expectations. Curtis, one more question from my side on this whole topic of ESG. Can you, typically think of any firms or organizations which may not be doing enough, and I don't want you to name firms or particular organizations, but any sort of case studies or any examples of firms that may not have taken some of this seriously, and what sort of consequences they must have faced. Or there are a lot of firms, we keep hearing this a lot, that a lot of firms engage in what is called greenwashing, which is that showing to their customers and investors and shareholders that they are doing a lot around climate change, but actually not being true to what they're reporting on. And do you think that this whole ESG reporting regime can make this whole process a little more trusted and get firms to truly report what they are actually working towards in ESG terms?
Well, I'm not surprised that you will find firms who will greenwash or whitewash what they're doing. They think that it will help their bottom line, but I think in the eventual analysis, it will prove them wrong. I believe that as ESG becomes more and more regulated, it will be very difficult for those type of firms to promote that kind of approach to ESG, because the downside of not having a transparent ESG proposition or proposal will become immediately apparent to everyone. So I don't think there's any way of escaping it or greenwashing it, as some would say. It's going to become very apparent, obvious, and those firms who choose to dance around the edge or play games will eventually face the obvious consequences.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And that comes with reputational risks related to how much access of funding that you might have, and legal penalties in many cases as well. Okay, I see Sneha's hand up. Sneha, if you could introduce yourself and ask your question.
Absolutely. Hello, Mr. Curtis. Hi, Arpit. And first of all, great session. It was a pleasure listening you speak, sir. So my question is, the ESG reporting policy that we are speaking of, there are a lot of frameworks, in the sense that there is a GRI, there is a SASB. Recently, India is talking BRSR reporting. So with so many something like a GRI, what was the need felt for reporting frameworks at a localized level, and would it put a lot of unnecessary pressure on the companies? And what is it that the company should really, how should they basically react to it, or how should they basically look into it in terms of when they have to report into this multiple frameworks?
It's a great question, Sneha. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that, as I said earlier on, businesses should not see the requirements of ESG as being a negative influence on their bottom line. They should see it as a plus. That also involves a certain amount of education. But as in most things, I think the easiest route for those companies, especially the small ones who might find some of the requirements onerous, is to introduce them gradually, introduce reporting gradually. As the months and years go by, it will become increasingly easier to implement. But I don't think that one should or can avoid an ESG proposition, having an ESG proposition. It's something that you'll have to do one way or another.
And about Sneha's question on, these multiple reporting standards, why do you think would there have been a need to have like something which is more global like GRI, and then different countries coming up with their own standards? Do you think there's merit to having so many of these standards out there in the market? I know, Sneha, if that was your question.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, that is what I wanted to understand.
So over to you, Mr. Raynold, for that.
You mean?
So the question that Sneha was asking, sir, is that there is a global standard. So, for example, at the global level, UN has their own standards for businesses. UNGC, Global Compact, has their own standards. World Economic Forum has their own standards. Then SASB has their own standards. GRI has their own standards. And now at the national level, so for example, in India, BRSR has come up as a national standard for India, which is a signal that, right now it's only for the top companies, then it'll be required by everyone. Why do you think that there are so many different standards? And do you think that there is any merit or advantage of having these multiple standards or having national standards?
Well, I think what global businesses need to do is to move towards a universal standard. Having multiple standards in different countries invites a lot of confusion, and some businesses will take advantage of it, especially those who are doing the greenwashing. So there will be a need, while it is important that every country develops an ESG strategy and a way to regulate it, there are benefits to be accrued from having a universal standard. So I think what needs to be done is that somebody, some agency, probably within the United Nations, can draw from best practices of all these various ESG strategies and come up with something universal that would benefit everyone and benefit the planet globally. As I said, it's a good thing to have the regulations, but you have to have some measure of universality.
Sure.
To avoid confusion. Because you know that there are businesses, they are very adept at exploiting the loopholes between the different systems. So it is important that you have a universal standard for ESG reporting and ESG.
But don't you think that would also curtail some degree of flexibility, which would be required depending on various national contexts, various regional contexts, etc.? Because as far as a standard is just a common language that everybody can speak, it's useful. But if it is just one common standard with no sectoral, no regional considerations, don't you think it would become extremely restrictive?
As we know from other precedents of treaties and you have to have it as flexible as possible, but not too flexible, because then you're basically going back to ground zero. But you have to have a measure of flexibility. I'm not sure how effective that can be, but you have to push the envelope as far as possible in terms of restrictions, and then stop at a certain point. Because you don't want it to become too restricted, because then certain countries will just opt out.
Yeah.
But
No,
from my experience of dealing with these kind of issues where you have multiple standards of operation, you have to have as much flexibility as can be allowed to make the system reasonably effective.
Absolutely. I think it should be flexible, but not too flexible and neither too rigid. I think that's the sweet spot over there, because a lot of times what happens is that if it is too flexible, or if there are too many standards available, then companies can can go standard shopping and just combine the sort of standards that work for them. And I think it's eventually it's an evolving debate. It's something that we are still getting to know as a human collective or a human species. That how do we solve for some of these really complex requirements through human organizations, which is the private sector, the government, and the civil society. With that, Mr. Raynold, I thank you so much for your time, and I thank all of our dear friends who have joined us today to start our discussion on ESG, which would grow increasingly technical, but we'll make sure that we take baby steps so that by the end of our workshop series, you understand not just the importance of it, but also have a very solid skill set with hands-on experience on coming up with some of these ESG assessment reports, especially the BRSR report. Please do remember that we start with the main portion of our training program on May 27th. Early application deadlines close on May 10th. There would be much fewer seats left after that, so we encourage you to apply in the early application deadline. And this second application deadline, the final one, is going to be the May 21st, so just about a week before our sessions start. And it's during this time we will start onboarding you on our Google Classroom, on various WhatsApp and Slack groups, etc., and start getting to know each other. So by the 21st, that's probably going to be the last chance to apply to this one. And then if you want more understanding, more knowledge on this particular thing, do visit recycle.com/BRSR. To apply, it's going to be the same link, it's a very simple application form. So we encourage you to go ahead and apply for it. Again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your questions. And Mr. Raynold, always a pleasure. It's indeed a privilege to have discussed this very important topic with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity.